Sliding or striding. Now, what's this episode about? No, it's not sexual positions. Get your minds out of the gutter. It's actually about whether you should move in with someone or whether you should not. Are you just going to slide into moving in with someone, where it just happens and you don't even realize it's happened? Maybe someone's lease has run out. Maybe they've just keep spending way too many nights there, and before you know it, you're living together. Or are you going to stride into living together where you sit down, you discuss it, you think about it? Now, I'm not saying either one's right or wrong, but it's up to you to make sure you're making the right decisions for yourself, especially in 2025. This is your year of improvement. The biggest thing I find is everyone always gets asked this question: oh, should I move in with my boyfriend or not? A lot of people think, look, if I move in now, I'm that much closer to a commitment. I'm that much closer to a full on relationship. Well, actually, sometimes that can be exactly the opposite. All right, everyone, listen up. You think life's a smooth ride? Think again. From hot takes to vodka breaks, I'm here to serve it straight. No chaser, just a twist of lime. It's time to get real. Pour yourself a skinny bitch and get ready for a vodka lecture. From me, Krissy Marsh, unfiltered, unapologetic, and straight to the point. Get ready for your weekly shot of reality. So all of a sudden, you're there 24/7, you're jumping into bed naked every night, the mystery's gone out of the relationship, you're squabbling over who's washing the dishes, who's doing the mundane domestics. Now there's no mystery left in the relationship. So it's not always a good thing to think moving in together, if it's not the right time, is going to make more of a commitment into a relationship. Don't get me wrong. Johnny and I were on a very, very fast track in terms of when we met each other. We got engaged super quickly. We didn't move in together until we actually did get engaged, because that for me was something that, I loved having my own apartment, my own independence. I felt for me it kept the mystery. My mum's got this great saying is, why buy a book when you've got the whole library? Meaning, well, if they're already there with you, living with you, if you've already got the whole package, why does it matter about getting married? And I think it's a really interesting concept, because a lot of people these days don't necessarily need to get married in order to move in together, in order to have, a fantastic relationship. But I think it's more, when is the right time is when you are ready to have that commitment. Like, at the end of the day, you've got to know each other's financial situations before you're moving into each other. You've got to understand, whose couch is what, who's going to bring the fridge, are you going to buy a pet together? Because all of these things are intertwining two lives so heavily that when shit does hit the fan, and if you weren't ready to move in and you're breaking up, it makes it a whole lot messier, a whole lot scarier. And unfortunately, you don't have those documents and that sort of set marriage or long-term relationship that how things should be split, and you've got guidelines on how things should be separated. And I know any breakups and separation and divorces are never ever easy, and so that's why I think you've really got to think twice before making this huge commitment about moving in with each other. I've had a lot of friends of mine, an old flatmate. He had one of the worst breakups imaginable. And it was just a short term. Oh, she can move in with me, it's all going to be fine. Well, she ended up turning out to be a psycho, and the rest is history. So you really do have to think about it. I can't tell you how many friends that have all had this exact case scenario. Basically, they're living together, they've moved in together, things don't turn out how they want, they both signed the lease together. All of a sudden, there's an emotional eviction. There's an emotional eviction from one party to the other, but the other doesn't want to move out because, they're 50-50 on the rent, they're 50-50 on the lease. So although they've had this emotional disconnection, they decide to punish and torture each other. I just don't know how anyone could do it and stay with each other. And a lot of the time it comes down to financial. They can't afford to break the lease. They don't have anyone else to move in. So there's all these things that people don't really think about. Another case scenario of one of my friends was, he'd basically moved in with this girl. They had the full emotional, conviction, but it was it was his place. He owned it. She always felt like she wasn't quite welcome there. He was making her pay rent. It was all very awkward. All of a sudden, he became a landlord, not just her lover. And it's very, very difficult in that situation. I think a lot of people that would normally break up in a relationship stay there because they've got this full commitment of a house. So it really is important that you understand and you think about things before you do move in with each other. And you got to think about the power play. You know, if you're moving into someone else's apartment, is it all their furniture? Is it all their things? You know, how that other person's going to feel. So I think it's really important to sit down and discuss things like, okay, what furniture are you bringing in? Who's going to do the cooking? Are we going to have shared groceries? Are we going to have combined finances? So you got to think about it too, that you decide, no, we're going to keep everything separate because we're just moving in together. We're not going to combine finances. Then all of a sudden you turn around, you get married and it's bang, everything's going to be combined. Whereas I know so many of my friends where after marriage, they've kept everything separate as well. So it's kind of a really odd situation. You're sort of setting yourself up for the way that you want to have your relationship in the future as well, without it sort of being this big milestone. So I definitely think in my opinion, that the stride is a lot better than the slide. And if you have had the slide, maybe it's time to sit down and talk about the stride. It doesn't mean if you've moved in with someone for just the sake of it, and it has been a sort of a slide move in, that there's a time that you might sit down and say, okay, I think we really need to talk about things more. You know, I'm hating the way that I'm buying all the groceries and things are quite uneven, and really sort of, have that open communication to try and get that power play correct within the dynamics of a relationship. And I'm not saying just because you're married and you've got a ring on your finger that moving in with someone's going to be magical, and but there obviously is a lot deeper and a lot higher level of commitment if you have had that stride where you sit down and talk about things before you actually move in. So it is a really emotional time for people. Some of my friends have actually decided to move in with their boyfriends with another flatmate there. Now that's a recipe for disaster as well, because the flatmate signed up with you not to have the extra girlfriend or boyfriend coming in as well. So that can cause all sorts of different power plays within your living environment. And I think it is so important because where you live and that relationship you have affects so many other areas of your life. Certainly your finances, when you move out, who takes the couch that you bought together, who takes the fridge you bought together. It is like a divorce. So you've got to think about it and not just slide in and, casually have things run away from you into moving with each other. Is probably if you've had a conflict before. Have you had a real fight before? Is this relationship real, or is everything just so perfect and so great? I mean, conflict is normal in any healthy relationship, in any equal relationship. It's important to fight, and I'm not talking like losing your shit and crying and throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm talking about just genuine conflict. No, that's not right. Or, I don't believe that. Or why are you saying that to me? I think the biggest thing is, with conflict, it can often be about power. It can often be that you're feeling that you don't trust them, or you might be feeling that they're not pulling their weight enough, or, you might be scared that they're going out for a night out with the boys and you might necessarily trust them. I think the important thing with that is, really understanding that conflict is not bad. Conflict is really healthy within a relationship. And I think that's really important to understand, that you're not on this honeymoon fairy tale. It's super, super important that, when you're in that living together relationship, that you've got to have fights, that there's got to be hard, tough arguments about finances and who's paying for what, and, who's doing more work around the house or not. And, a lot of people think leaving a bad relationship or leaving a bad, living together situation is that you've failed, or that you haven't done enough. But a lot of the time you don't want to leave because you don't want to be alone. And you don't stay in a bad relationship, or you don't stay in, a living environment, whether it's even a flatmate. It doesn't have to be someone that you're actually, going out with. But if you're not feeling good within that environment, that's going to affect your entire life. And discussing it and chatting it with the person, but sometimes it's just a no-win situation. So you're actually not just leaving the house, you're leaving what you think your life should have looked like. You're leaving what you think your life should be. And for a lot of people, that's really, really hard to do. I mean, luckily enough, I have never lived with in a relationship with a man before I've moved in with them. Obviously, Johnny and I spent a lot of time together and we stayed over each other's houses, but I still like that independence. But I've also had some shocker flatmates as well, where they've, eaten too many of my baked beans and I can hear the beeping of a night and they've come back drunken and they're eating all my food and never pay for it. So that's been some really, hard-ass conversations having to do that as well. So don't be afraid to leave. It's better to be alone than to be in the wrong relationship. And sometimes being alone and working on yourself in a really good environment is a lot better than staying in a bad environment, staying there for the wrong reasons because you feel like you've failed. So think about all these things inside yourself, because this is going to affect your work. It's going to affect your relationship with all your other friends. It's going to affect your relationship with your family. So it's super, super important. Know within yourself, you know the truth. And don't feel like if you're leaving, it is a failure. It is you're giving up a life that you thought you should have had. That was never there. That's a fantasy that you've got in your head. Move on, get real, get on with it. Now, I'm not being an old nana saying don't move in together, don't do this. I just want to make sure that you're moving in together with the right expectations for a long-term future. You don't do this sort of thing and make this massive commitment to be like an overnight thing. I think what's really important is you've got to ensure, your relationship is in a healthy state. It is in a good way before you move in. I think you've got to both understand, can you both afford it? Have you discussed finances? Have you discussed who's doing the cleaning? Have you discussed each other's expectations? As long as you've done all of these things and had a really, really good chat about it, I think that's the most important thing. The key to strong relationship is that you are striding into this, moving in together, and you're not sliding into a huge mistake. I want to leave you with this. Making it work to stay in a lease is like staying on the Titanic because you bought a room. If you know anyone that's on a sinking ship, pass this podcast on to them. Get them out of that bad living arrangement. Make sure you rate me 5 on Spotify. And if you've got any questions, just click on the link below, send them through to me. I love answering them. Until next week, be that better version of yourself. I know you can do it.